The diner was pretty quiet that Tuesday evening, just the usual after-work crowd picking at their meatloaf and mashed potatoes. I was wiping down the counter when old Mr. Henderson, who comes in every night for the early bird special, nudged me. "Look alive, Sarah," he grumbled good-naturedly. "Looks like you've got a big spender." I followed his gaze to the door. A man, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my car, walked in. He was tall, with a distinguished look and a bit of a tired slump to his shoulders. Definitely not our usual clientele. He sat at a booth by the window, pulling out a phone and looking at it intently. I grabbed my pad and pen, took a deep breath, and walked over. "Welcome to Rosie's Diner, sir. Can I get you something to drink?" He looked up, and his eyes, a piercing shade of blue, met mine. There was a sadness in them that surprised me. "Just a coffee black, please," he said, his voice smooth and deep. As I poured his coffee, I couldn't help but notice the locket he was wearing. It was a simple silver oval, nestled against his crisp white shirt. Nothing fancy, but it looked well-loved, worn smooth from years of handling. Something about it nagged at me, a tiny flicker of recognition I couldn't quite place. I brought him his coffee, and he thanked me with a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He went back to his phone, and I went back to refilling salt shakers, but my gaze kept drifting to that locket. It was bothering me. Finally, curiosity got the better of me. When I went back to check on him, I hesitated. "Excuse me, sir," I started. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but that locket, it looks very familiar." He looked up, a hint of surprise in his blue eyes. He reached for the locket, his fingers tracing its smooth surface. "It was my mother's," he said softly. "It's all I have left of her." My heart pounded. "Do you mind if I take a closer look?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He seemed hesitant, but then he unclipped the chain and handed it to me. As my fingers closed around the cool metal, a jolt went through me. My breath caught in my throat. It was the locket. The same distinctive scratch on the back, the slightly tarnished hinge. It was identical to the one in my own memory, a memory I'd clutched onto for years. "Inside," I managed to choke out, "is there a picture inside?" He nodded, his gaze fixed on my face, a flicker of something new in his eyes now, curiosity, apprehension. With trembling fingers, I pressed the tiny clasp. The locket sprang open, revealing 2 miniature photographs. On one side, a young woman, her smile bright and her eyes full of life. On the other, a tiny baby, swaddled in a blanket. My vision blurred. It was her. My mother. And the baby, that was me. A sob tore from my throat. That's my mom," I whispered, the words barely audible. "And that's me, as a baby." The man's face went white. He stared at the locket, then at me, then back at the locket, his eyes wide with disbelief. His hand reached out, shaking, and took the locket from my grasp. He looked at the pictures, then at my face, a slow realization dawning in his eyes. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Is that really you?" Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and fast. I just nodded, unable to speak. He put the locket down on the table with a clatter. His hands went to his face, covering his eyes, and his shoulders began to shake. He was crying. This powerful, impeccably dressed man was sobbing, openly and without restraint, in the middle of Rosie's diner. I thought you were gone," he choked out, his voice broken. They told me she left, and took you with her. That she didn't want anything to do with us. They told me the same about you, I managed to say, my voice raspy from crying. That you were too busy with your business, that you didn't want a child. He looked at me, his eyes red and swollen, and in them I saw a raw pain that mirrored my own. My name is Thomas, he said, his voice still shaky. I'm your father. The words hung in the air, heavy and unbelievable. My father. The man I'd only ever seen in blurry, faded photographs, the man I'd longed for, fantasized about, sometimes even resented. He was sitting across from me, a billionaire, in a small-town diner. We sat there for what felt like an eternity, the sounds of the diner fading into the background. Mr. Henderson and the other regulars were pretending not to stare, but I could feel their eyes on us. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered but this moment. Mom kept you a secret, I explained, after what they told her. She wanted to protect me. He nodded, a profound sadness in his eyes. And I believed them. I never stopped looking, not really. But I gave up hope so long ago. He reached across the table, his hand hesitant. Can I hug you? I didn't hesitate. I rounded the table and enveloped him in a fierce embrace, the kind of hug you give someone you thought you'd lost forever. His arms wrapped tightly around me, and for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of completeness, of belonging. The rest of the evening was a blur of explanations, questions, and more tears. We talked about my mother, about the circumstances of their separation, about the lies that had kept us apart for so long. He told me about his life, about the guilt he carried, the constant ache of not knowing. And I told him about mine, about growing up with just my mom, about working at the diner to make ends meet, about the empty space in my heart where a father should have been. He pulled out his phone and showed me pictures. Pictures of himself when he was younger, pictures of a grand house, a life so different from mine. But as he spoke, his voice cracked with the same raw emotion as mine. The money, the status, it all melted away, leaving only a man who had lost his family and was now, against all odds, finding a piece of it again. Before he left, he handed me back the locket. "Keep it," he said, his voice still thick. "It belongs to you now. It brought us together." As I watched him walk out of the diner, into the quiet night, I clutched the locket in my hand. The weight of it was comforting, a tangible link to a past I never knew and a future that was suddenly, miraculously, wide open. My life, my entire world, had shifted on its axis because of a simple silver locket and a chance encounter in a diner.